Welcome to a compilation of 1KNL hands from our Play and Explain episodes. Enjoy this longer video and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what was your favorite hand.
Ace-10 off is, certainly a good enough hand to raise blind versus blind. If villain 3-bets, it's a hand that we can start to begin to consider 4-betting, but yeah, going to be putting in some money here if villain tries any shenanigans. All right, so they just call. Going to start out betting small on 995 rainbow. This is mostly a value bet. I can get value from, worse ace highs, from gut shots, from, like 3 straights like queen jack off, jack 10 off. Hands that might raise, I think some of their gut shots could raise. Their trips probably going to raise. I don't know if they're 5x raises or not, but ace high just has too much value to fold to the flop raise. We turn top pair, top kicker, which is nice. Now we beat 5x and some of the mergier hands that they might raise with. I don't expect them to bet this card, though, with a 5. So when they bet this card, they're essentially saying that they have a 9 or they don't have a 9. And so because it's blind versus blind, it's quite difficult to make trips. So just can't really fold top pair, top kicker, and most likely going to be calling river bets. 7, complete 6-8, but doesn't do anything when they have queen jack or king jack. Those types of hands. And then they probably just have some air balls left in their range as well that they can fire this third shell with. So yeah, plan when we call the flop with ace high, we turn top pair, top kicker. I don't think that really significantly improves the value or strength of our hand, but definitely going to be calling a bet here if they do decide to bet. They don't. Nice hand. 2 7s, going to raise it up from the cutoff. It's a hand that, if we did get 3-bet, we're definitely going to be calling a 3-bet. It's pretty good. Quads. So we flop quads, 9-7-7, rainbow. Certainly going to be starting out with a bet. Generally, pair boards start with a small bet, so that's going to be the path that we take if villain does decide to check. They appear to be thinking about something or going to the bathroom. God only knows what they're doing. So yeah, we'll be starting out with a third. Expecting villains, straight draws, 6-8, all their pocket pairs, any kind of 9 that they might have, jack 10, 8-10, all of those to at least call and potentially raise. Overcard turn, it's going to be good for barreling. So when we bet the flop, now like jack 10 and queen jack, jack 10 is a double gut shot now. Queen jack is just a gut shot now. Villain's probably going to recognize that they have a fair amount of 7x in their check call range. So, when I do bet the turn here, and I'm just going to go for a really big bet. When I bet the turn here, I'm kind of saying that I have a 7 or nothing, and it's much easier to have nothing than a 7. So I actually think that I can get bluff caught fairly wide. The 10, I think I'm just going to pile. It completes 6-8. It completes jack 8. If they did call the flop with a king, then I think we can get hero called by worse. So just targeting their bluff catchers. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't get the call, but pretty happy with my sizing scheme there, and I think it just makes sense. Gonna defend, facing a min open with the king 9 off. Flopping, top pair, second kicker, pretty good. Can do a wide variety of things facing a bet. I think, facing a smaller bet. Check raises on the table. Villain goes ahead and bets half. I could honestly go either way. We'll start with calling, though. Pretty good turn. So turning top 2, double flush draw, a bunch of gut shots villain can have. The king, is going to demote my 5x, my tray x, my 9x. So it's a card that I expect villain to barrel on quite frequently. And I don't think I'm going to raise. I believe that I'm just going to call the turn. And then, the tray on the river that completes the flush is not super great for getting more value against villain's bluffs. I also don't think we can check raise when the backdoor flush completes and villain bets. So, yeah, I just think we call if villain bets. Happily call. Pocket nines on the button, going to flat, facing a hijack open. We could also 3-bet nines. I think 3-betting is totally reasonable. Now we get the downside of flatting, which is facing a squeeze from the small blind, but we have a hand that is totally fine playing for 14 big blinds, and so we shall. 10-10 tray, not a super scary board. Villain can have a lot of suited broadways that are unpaired, suited ace-x that they opt to squeeze with, potentially suited connectors that they opt to squeeze with. So certainly going to have to start out by calling a bet and facing a third, pretty easy, and that's pretty good turn card, turning a boat. The SPR is 1.5, so yeah, villain's kind of... We can attack villain in a variety of ways now with our value. We can check back the turn, we can bet facing check, we can call facing bet. We just have a lot of options here being in position. I think that I'm just going to check behind. Yeah. So we get a double paired river. The reason I like checking behind is because we can capture bluffs from, villains like queen jacks and ace kings and those types of hands. Actually kind of an interesting spot now once the board double pairs and villain bets 66%. Do we raise? I do think villain's 10x is likely to keep barreling on the turn, at least at some frequency. They can certainly be value betting worse, like overpairs and those types of hands. I think they're going to have more overpairs in the range than they will full houses with 10x. So I do believe that I need to go for value here. It's just a matter of what size, and I think size is like really, really interesting here. Jamming is going to have... I think I'm actually just going to click. I think that my bluffs would probably just click and not invest the extra $107 facing what is almost certainly a polarized river bet. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know if I like clicking or jamming better, but yeah, I guess clicking got the money, so there you go. Jacks facing a fishy friend, a white belt friend. Pretty pumped about 3-betting. Villain's not going to fold at a super high frequency, so just going to 3-bet and kind of go from there. 4-bet would be tricky. Tricky to navigate, so let's hope for just the cold call. Okay, so we got tricky anyway. So king 10-6. I'm just going to bet the flop, and I'm going to bet relatively small. Quarter pot. I can get value from their gut shots, flush draws, 10x. 7 completes straight draws on the bottom end to like 8-9. It gives 6-7 2 pair. The 9 is not great. It completes queen jack. Backdoor flush coming in is not great because villain's gonna have 10x, king x. Yeah, just not the greatest of boards or runouts for the jacks, but didn't lose too much, so no big deal. Kings against our friend who has beaten us with the jacks. Queen 10-9. I've seen better flops. I've seen worse flops. Certainly going to be starting out with a bet. Half pot. This is purely for value. 8, not a great turn card for kings. Really don't want villain to bet. Once they check back, I think they can have a fair amount of queen X, fair amount of 10x, maybe even some 8x. So gonna try to eke out a little bit of thin value here on the river by betting a quarter pot on the 4 straight, and we'll be folding if we did get raised, but squirrely fish can't grab on. So queen 10 off, gonna be certainly good enough to defend if the small blind doesn't 3-bet. Which they do not, so that's a good flop. Jack 9-4. I expect if villain does c-bet here to bet big and heavily check. Facing a big bet, I could raise, I could call. And there's the big bet, so 3/4. All right, so we called the big bet. Jack pairing on the turn. Top pair pairing is a fairly donkable card after villain bets 70%. So yeah, gonna go for the turn lead. Actually, when I think about it, I actually just would like to check raise the flop with the queen of diamonds. I like having the queen of diamonds because then on flush completing turns, I've got natural barrels that aren't flushes but still maintain some kind of equity. But I guess calling and donking works too. All right, 6s on the button. Very flattable hand in a flattable scenario here with these types of hands, and we get squeezed from the big blind. If the low jack doesn't 4-bet, then we will be coming along for the ride and hoping for the best. I don't think the big blind is like messing around here, squeezing, facing a low jack open and a button flat. I think they're probably fairly equity driven, so maybe ace queen off would be like the bottom of their 3-betting range, and then like 10s plus and some suited Broadway type hands. Villain bets 75% on paired low. I don't think, don't think I can fold an overpair here with 6s. It's just, too good of a board. Misses villains ace kings, misses villains ace queens, misses villains suited Broadways. Really need to defend here with my tiny overpair. And now facing a third is strange, but I'm going to call. Just don't think I can fold in. Yeah, okay. All right. Oddly played ace king by villain, but I'll take the win. Jacks on the button. Happy opening versus the big blind, who appears to be a broken stack, and will probably be getting in there. Facing a 3-bet. That looks to be a fairly normal size versus a regular looking villain. Just calling jacks, not going to be putting in an in position 4-bet. 7-5 deuce facing half. Nothing to do other than call. Flush completer and the 5 pairing. Both of those are going to be good for me. We have, more 5x in our range than our opponent, especially after they start out with half pot. We also have some flushes in our range. I think I'm going to bet the turn for value here. Can certainly get value from like ace king, ace queen with a heart, maybe king queen with a heart. All right. King queen off, easy open. Still have our broken stack villain in the small blind that we can hopefully invite into the mix. Okay, so top pair second kicker with a backdoor flush draw. It's going to be a board that you can big bet, generally big bet, or check. Starting out with half, the 9 completes queen 10. King 9 is now to pair. We have a queen, so I don't think our hand is good enough to go for 3 streets of value, so going to check behind. Rivering trips is nice. Villain betting 75%. I think they could probably bet even a jack, like queen jack, ace jack on the river for value. They probably have some worse kings as well. They also have, probably boats and straights. So I do think my hand is good enough to raise and would probably just fold to the bet 3-bet. But yeah, happy to eke out some extra value there versus their king 10. Jacks, certainly going to be a 3-bet. Have some depth with this villain, so see if there's any fireworks. Facing a cold 4-bet from either deep villain, that would also be firework worthy. They do appear to be thinking about it, so okay, so faded the cold 4-bet. Gonna get 4-bet here at a relatively high frequency. There you go, and it's relatively small 4-bet, so certainly going to be continuing with jacks and then hoping for the best. Queen 9. They're going to have ace queen. I'm going to have ace queen. They're going to be 4-betting ace queen off and probably calling with ace queen suited. I'll be calling with ace queen off and ace queen suited. I'll have 9s. I don't think they're 4-betting 9s, so I actually think that I do have more of the top tiered hands than them. Once the 9 pairs, though, that reduces my combos of 9s to 1. So I will say I think I need to bet the turn. Potentially get some value from ace high, thinking that I can have hands like under pairs. But I really think that my range just wants to bet here on the turn, considering its makeup is like, gut shots that are unpaired, as well as boats. 7 on the river. I'm just going to check behind. I don't think my hand is strong enough to get multiple streets of value. So, very nice. All right, we got more jacks. This is a session filled with jacks, apparently. Ten 7-3. Gonna start out with half. Just board that just have to bet with jacks. Villain can certainly call with many worse hands. Ace is not super great. Promotes top ace 10 to top 2. When they call with a hand like ace queen or ace jack, now they turn top pair. So not the greatest of turn cards for us, but villain does still maintain king queen, queen jack, 8-9, maybe jack 9, 5-6, those types of hands. So I think it's way too premature to fold. Queen of clubs on the river completes a front door flush. Thank God they just check behind, because I don't think I get the call if they would have jammed. 6-8 suited. Easy to defend. Flopping second pair and a gut shot on mono. Pretty dicey proposition. I don't think if villain does bet, I would rather villain just not bet on the 3 straight 3 flush board. If they do bet small, I almost certainly have to call with my hand, but I'm not loving it. Them checking behind. Also don't love that. I'm not really loving very much about this situation, to be honest. They can certainly check back some of their top pairs, some of their over pairs. They maintain value when they check back, but facing a third on the turn, we just have to call. Ace on the river, pretty innocuous, honestly. I don't know that villain bets a lot of their ace X on the turn. If they have, like, yeah. Okay, so if they have enough flush draw, they're going to bet the flop at a high clip. So if they make 2 pair on the river, they make 2 pair. But given the price, I think we just have to call. Hooray, more jacks. Everybody's favorite hand to play in poker. It's actually feels like it's been quite kind to us today. So, all right, facing a 3-bet, we will be calling. 6-7 deuce rainbow. We flop an overpair. Facing like a 3rd. Pretty easy call. So board pairing, quite good for us. You know, villain may have aces, kings, and queens. I suspect that they bet them on the turn at a decent clip. So I do believe there is some reduction there for those hands. So I'm going to bet a 3rd and, you know, target all their worst hands for value. You know, there's 7x, 8s, 9s, 10s. I think those hands can probably play this way. They will have some 6x, which is a little bit scary, but I just think that my hand is good enough to jam for value against, against the way that they played this hand. Like their range, I think, has some removal for aces and kings and queens. So. Whew. Snap call, but snap one. Pocket aces. Pretty good hand. Facing 3 bets from pretty aggressive villain. Going to certainly be putting in a 4-bet. Things could get wacky if we face a cold 4-bet. But we'll probably jam if that scenario were to occur. So 4-betting here to 22 big blinds. Ideally, villain just shoves and makes for a easily played hand. Okay, so villain tank calls. 10-8, 4 with 2 diamonds. Really easy board for us to start out with a quarter. Plan is to put all the money in at some point, assuming we don't get, like, you know, the run out of death. But yeah, pretty safe board. So did not really expect to get raised. I should have jammed the flop, I think. The Jack of Diamonds is pretty atrocious turn card. We don't have a diamond, so villain can maintain all of their flush draws. They still have sets. With the SPR being what it is, I'm going to check the river. I just think that villain can still check behind flushes. They can check behind sets. I don't know what I'm targeting when I jam. I hope to God they don't jam if I check. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to check fold. Probably. Just can't really imagine a bluff that takes this line. Like, we have the ace of clubs, so we block their backdoor nut flush draws. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty unhappy with the way I played that. I should have just bet jammed the flop. Pocket nines in the big blind. Very 3-bettable hand here. We fill in 4 bets. We have a little bit of depth and certainly a hand that's strong enough to call the 4-bet. Jack, Jack, 7. Very easy continue for value here on the flop. Villain can call with, 7x, all their pocket pairs, a bunch of ace highs, a bunch of overcards. Just, yeah. Board double pairs. almost certainly too thin to go for 3 streets. I think if I had a hand like aces or kings, where I can target a lot of their mid pocket pairs, like my hand, for instance, then could think about betting the turn. But yeah, with 9s, just gonna let them, potentially bluff the river with some counterfeit pocket pairs, and then maybe potentially bluff the river with like their backdoor flush draws, their queen 10s, their king queens, their backdoor straight draws, those types of hands. I guess the size that we would like to face would be like 3/4, probably not all in, but they go ahead and check. So now the question, the ball is kind of thrown back in our court. Do we want to value bet here? I don't think they check a jack at a super high frequency. I would be checking back, certainly ace high, king high, but I'm going to go for it with 9s. And I'm using a big size because I think this size is much more difficult for villains to mess with. I should maintain some jack X in my turn check back range. So I do have boats here when I bet. So, oh man, what a spot. Do you really check a jack on the river hoping that I bet? You're hoping that I bet a hand like queens and kings and call it check raise all in when you check? Maybe you're hoping that I bluff when you have a boat? Man, it seems like betting would be fairly ideal after I check back the turn if you did have a jack. I'm quite suspicious. What bluffs do you have? That's one problem. I block a lot of your bluffs. You need to have like a counterfeit small pocket pair that you decide to go with after facing 90. It seems so unlikely. Oh, do I call or do I not call? Oh my god. Ace 7 of diamonds in the big blind. Facing a small blind open, going to be 3-betting. Flopping the backdoor nut flush draw. I believe I'm going to start out by betting a 3rd and following up on turns where we realize additional equity. Our villain is, on the more passive side. The tray connects with the bottom straight draws, but doesn't really change very much. So checking back, facing half on the river here. I think that villain can do this with some mergey hands, like maybe a 6. I do have some value that I bet the flop with and then check behind, then raise the river. Probably over pairs as well as hands like ace jack plus. So I think I'm just going to go for a river raise here with the ace 7 and try to target villains like 6x, maybe pocket 7s, pocket 8s, pocket 9s. not trying to fold out a set. Yeesh. Opening with ace jack off from the hijack. Small blind flatting, definitely on more of the white belt side. King 7 deuce rainbow. Gonna start out betting a 3rd. I think that this is essentially kind of a value bet. I think we can get called by many worse hands. Queen jack off, jack 10 off, queen 10 off, turn 6, river 7. Not really changing a ton about the board. I expect villains, 7x to bet big. So facing a small bet, I think it's just a pretty slam dunk call, assuming that we get called wide on the flop. 2 9s in the big blind. Facing our white belt friend, going to be 3-betting them, and if they so choose to jam, then we'll be here for it. Flopping a set, SPR under 1. Just going to check and potentially let villain stick the money in. Once their turn is a 3 straight, villain has a lot of pair plus draws that I think we can get called by. So yeah, gonna Put the money in. And villain's drawing dead. Ace 9 of diamonds. Going to start out with a 3-bet, playing 3-handed here. Ace high flop. Not the worst. So pretty good board. Could better check. I think I'm going to check behind having the backdoor nut flush draw. Turn, flush completer. It gets kind of dicey as to, you know, whether or not I can go 2 streets at this point. I think I'd be targeting hands like 8s, 9s, 7s that may have a club. I don't know that those hands call the turn if they don't have a club. So I think my plan is to play for 1 big bet on the river. Rivering top 2 is pretty interesting. I think I'm going to pull out the bazooka here on this run out, and now try to target ace X, potentially some like sticky bluff catchers once I have top 2. I don't think I have a ton of hands that want to take this line, a ton of natural value, so yeah, just going to go for it. Unfortunately, villain dodged the bazooka. So villain opening is a white belt. Gonna do a don't try this at home type of maneuver here, flatting from the small blind. Typically not a thing, but I desperately attempt to get in the mix versus white belts as often as possible. These types of hands, small pocket pairs, tend to play pretty well. 7-7-9, not the best of flops, not the worst of flops. Certainly going to start out by calling half with my pair. It's pretty dicey because we can get counterfeit by a 9, and now we can get counterfeit by an 8. Villain bets a turn, then we're just going to fold, but thankfully they check behind. Queen on the river, probably going to bluff catch. Yeah, just going to bluff catch facing this 75% pot size bet. They're really just repping like queen. There you go. King 7 suited. Certainly going to be worth an ISO if we get the chance. And we do. So going to raise to $40. Mr. what I presume to be a white belt for posting in the hijack. Top pair is a good hand. Probably want to play for at least a couple of bets and potentially all the money. Definitely could see myself betting the turn. It's hard to go 2 streets with King 7, but now that I think about it, yeah, I probably should have bet the turn. Facing half pot on the river on this run out, considering whether to jam or raise small, and just going to go for the small raise here. I think it's probably still too thin to jam, but yeah, villain called, so ace 4 off. Going to be one of the worst hands that I open with, blind versus blind, but it is a hand that I open with. Flipping gut shot and overcard. Certainly going to start out by betting. I think, you know, we can, again, get called by worse when we start out with a third, so it's almost like a value bet. I don't expect villain to fold a ton, considering all their overcards have some kind of equity. Facing a third, we're just going to be calling. Probably calling a bet on the river too. I think the hands that they bet for value are a turn or river, jack or 10. I don't think they should have a ton of 3x because of them not raising the flop, although they could probably have some slow played tray x. But yeah, I think their value range is just a little too thin here to fold. Yeah, that'll do it. Ace king on the button, facing multiple limpers. Gonna raise it up. Okay, so facing a relatively small 3-bet. I guess guess it is 15 big blinds, so it's a little bit bigger than usual, but my ISO is bigger than normal, so it makes some sense. We're also a little bit deeper than normal as well. Certainly going to be putting in the 4-bet with ace king. Ace king is a good hand, one that merits putting some monies in the pot. And if villain does, in fact, jam, we will be calling. Here we go. Ace. 7-5 suited, certainly going to be good enough to defend with facing a hijack open. Flopping bottom 2 is nice. If villain bets, we'll certainly check raise. On the 4, I believe we're just going to overbet. Target villains, queen jacks, queen tens, jacks, tens, nines, those types of hands. Pretty bad river, but I still think our hand is good enough to value bet. We should have more flushes than villain because they didn't c-bet the flop. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to bet, and if villain raises, I think we have to fold out. I don't really think we have much of a choice. We just have a bunch of flushes that we can defend with, so don't need to defend with 2 pair. All right, so jacks going to be 3-betting, facing low jack open. Will be defending if the low jack does 4-bet, but not jamming. I think I probably would have some natural traps here, like aces, kings, and potentially ace king off. This preflop scenario is one of the tighter preflop situations that you'll encounter low jack versus hijack. 18 big blind 4-bet. Can't really do much but call. Flopping an overpair is nice. Probably just going broke now, but we'll have to see based on the run out. Half pot. Definitely going to start out just by calling. Turn ace is really bad. Ace queen and ace king are now top pair. That's not the greatest of turns, I think. Yeah. Just gonna fold if villain bets, and certainly checking behind, but GG. 9-7 of clubs, certainly good enough to defend with in the big blind, facing hijack open. Maybe it'll fare better than our 7-5. Okay, well, we have top pair with the backdoor flush draw, so good start. Facing over half pot size bet, just gonna check call, nothing to do. Can't fold top pair, can't really check raise top pair in this situation. King on the turn is, you know, they're gonna bet the king a lot, but I don't know that it's like ultra threatening. Jack on the river, once again, it kind of turns my second pair into third pair. Facing bet versus hijack here on this run out. I think I'm just going to fold. I would call the flop with a bunch of king X that has backdoors. Man. Yeah, I just don't think I'm going to be able to defend a ton on this run out. So, yeah. Ace deuce of spades. Facing button open. Certainly going to be good enough to defend the big blind with. Flopping bottom pair with a gut shot. Again, good enough to defend facing a c-bet with. Villain checks behind. Now we're just going to be probably bluff catching a lot of different runouts. Facing a third, very elementary call. Flush completing river looks a little threatening, but not super threatening because I think villains do bet a lot of their flush draws on the flop. Small bet, good price. Bluff catch city. King jack suited. Small blind versus big blind. Certainly good enough to open with. Good enough to call a 3-bet with. Top pair. jack kicker, betting for value. Gonna check the turn, and based on what villain does, kind of figure out what I'm gonna do. So if villain bets the turn, we're just gonna check call and then check rivers. If villain were to check behind, we'd just value bet rivers, I believe, trying to target like ace high type hands. On 5-5-7-7, yeah, tough for villain to bet an amount that I'm not gonna call there. So nice check. Ace deuce of hearts, opening the cutoff. White belt calls on the button. Small blind squeezes to 13 big blinds. Certainly not folding ace deuce suited. It's going to play quite well multi-way, especially if our white belt friend gets involved from the button. So it's just call the 3-bet and hope to flop something good. That appears to be something good. Too good, in fact, I think, to bet multi-way. Let's give our white belt friend a chance to put some money in the pot. SPR is around 2, so we can get the money in kind of however we want. Ace on the turn should be good for betting, but I have an ace, so I block them from having an ace, which is not great. The small blind betting half pot I think is quite nice. Now we can call and, you know, call any river. Board pairs, if they have a boat, they have a boat. Facing check, though, just going to slam it in and hope to get bluff caught by ace-queen, something like that. Ace-king, ace-queen type hands. Alas. Calling the jack-9 of diamonds, hoping the white belt comes along. Flopping a straight, that's pretty good. Triple Broadway, two-tone. Villain starts out with about 40% pot. I think I'm just going to call. Don't have a ton of raises that don't 3-bet pre, like ace-x of clubs. So, you know, king-queen, 3-bets pre, kings, queens, tens. Don't have a ton of good hands here to check raise with. Don't have a ton of bad hands to check raise with. So, on the turn, villain bets 70 into 87. I think that I'm just going to call again. The king is not great. Now we don't get to raise the river if villain does bet. They have king-queen. They have kings. They have queens. They have tens. They have ace-jack. So would have just played the river for one more bet. If villain did bet, I think maybe I just maybe I check raise and then fold to bet 3-bet if the board doesn't pair. Queen 10 off. Blind versus blind. It's going to start by calling. Not the greatest of flops, but not the worst. Low, low, low. Villain starts out with a third. Gonna be peeling with my overcards. Turn is a 4. I think the 4 is generally better for us than the villain. So, yeah, they bet a third. I also think that they should be betting bigger when they do have a 4. So, just gonna go a little exploitative. Did not work out. Somehow they have a 4, so well played, villain. Sevens, blind versus my friend with 600 big blinds. Going to be a 3-bet from the big blind facing small blind. If the small blind 4-bets, will be calling. 10-4 deuce. Not the worst of flops. Going to start out by betting a quarter and calling a check raise. If villain does call the flop, probably going to be checking behind some. Villain goes ahead and puts in the check raise to a small amount, so we call. Turns a 3. It connects ace 5 and 5-6, which would be their 2 primary draws. Although I suspect villain could have a bunch of, you know, shenanigan-y type hands. So calling under half pot size bet. Just going to check back on the king. Probably prefer a bet on the river than villain checking. When villain checks, yeah, it's probably going to be some like top pair weak kicker like they had. King Jack of spades, easy button open. Easy call, facing big blind 3-bet. Top pair is nice. Villain checking is nice. So we could bet, we could check. My preference right now is going to be to check behind, but I could definitely see betting the flop. Facing flop check. Turn 8 doesn't really change anything. Villain bets a little bit over half pot. 10 of diamonds shouldn't change anything either because they bet a lot of their flush draws on the flop. So maybe they like did a mergey bet on the turn with 10s, but I don't expect to see this size. So I think if anything here, I could try to raise for value. What bluffs might I have? Maybe ace 4, maybe ace tray, maybe a hand like 6s or 7s that gets demoted on the 10. I think might be reasonable raises, but yeah, just call. Villain has the squadouche. 10s in the big blind. Gonna start out with a squeeze, facing button open, small blind flat. The jackpot is getting not that. What on earth? 44 big blinds, that's massive. We have a little bit of depth. All the options seem reasonable. I really don't know what to make of this. I haven't seen this villain do anything like this. Haven't seen proclivity for them to like just get the money in super light. 10s, I don't know if they want to play for 130 bigs here. I'm gonna fold, but I'm not happy with it. Ace king off and the big blind. Definitely going to be squeezing this. Getting a back jam by 6 would be nice, but alas. Queen 6 deuce, two-tone. Not a board that I'm going to be c-betting at a super high frequency. I believe I'm checking my king queens, checking my ace queens, checking my aces, checking my kings. 6 pairing on the turn doesn't really do very much for me. I do think some of those hands that I mentioned on the flop would start betting the turn, so maybe betting with ace king is okay. Rivering top pair, top kicker. Checking once again. Okay, so I think that if villain does have an ace, if either one of them does, they will place a bet anyway. I'm almost certainly going to be playing for stacks if, say, the 4 seed bets a third. Well, looks like I'm not playing for any more money. King jack off, going to be in open. Villain jams. So some context here. Assuming that the blinds fold, we're going to be calling all in. The 2 seed just lost with kings versus aces, and their stack dwindled from like 1,000 big blinds down to $225. So I suspect that jam is coming at a very, very, very high clip. Queen, please. 10. No. Kings is a pretty good hand. Big blind squeeze is pretty nice. I don't think I'm going to flat here with the villain behind, so just going to be 4-betting the kings and praying to the poker gods that the big blind just rips it. Prayer answered. Oh, let's hold. Very nice. King queen off on the button. Facing a 3-bet, going to be a call. Top pair, pretty nice. For the theme of today, I think we could better check with our top pair. King high board. Checking behind, going to be the path that we take. 9 on the turn. So I think villain has hands like queen jacks, 10s. They can have 9x, maybe like 8s. 7-8, those types of hands. I don't think they're going to play for 2 streets. So just going to check behind and place a really big bet facing a check. Now facing a third on the river, I believe that our hand just wants to play for more money. So we're going to raise for value. Try to target, 8, 9, 9, 10, queens, jacks, 10s that might be thin value betting. Maybe even a hand like king jack or king 10 that can thin value bet the river. I think that's a reasonable targeting range. I don't think they have a ton of flushes or sets. Flushes would be the most likely hand that might check, like an 8, 9, 9, 10 of diamonds type hand, but yeah, I think king queen is just certainly good enough to raise the river. King 10 of diamonds certainly going to be openable from the cutoff. Assuming the big blind folds, king 10 of diamonds is going to be chunked into our 4 betting range, so no whammies. Best of luck us. 8 tray. So, we have a bunch of over pairs. We have a bunch of, backdoor flush draws. I think this is just a board. Gonna start out by betting a quarter. 7 of hearts doesn't change anything. I believe I'm just gonna bet a quarter again. I think they can have some like ace, queen, ace, jack, ace, 10 of hearts, queen, jack of hearts, jack, 10 of hearts potentially. On the board, running out trips. King 10 high is one of my very worst hands, so just going to stick it in. I don't think I jam ace king on the river because ace king beats enough hands to jam. So yeah, king 10, just one of my worst hands, so got to bluff with something. E6 of diamonds. Let's hope it doesn't get 3 bets. There we go. We shall peel. Ace king 8. It's the best of times, the worst of times. Villain has ace king, aces, kings, and 8s, as well as ace 8 and king 8 suited. So yeah, not a board where we're jumping for joy, but we do have top pair, so that's worth something. The queen on the turn is probably a good turn card for us because we have jack 10 off in our range. So now I expect villain to check. If villain were to... Yeah, okay, so if villain were to bet the turn, then I think we just fold our a6, honestly. And I don't really... Should have thought about my decision to better check the river a little bit more in depth there. I think betting is probably superior, targeting king jack, king 10, queen jack, queen 10, those type of hands. Little limp pot action here with the 4-5 off. Pretty good flop. We have a draw to the nuts, which is always a good thing. So villain bets 1 big blind after, the white belt who limps bets 1 big blind. Pretty easy call. I think they could be doing this with just a very, very, very wide range of hands. Considering we have 5 high on the turn, I think we need to bet to try to fold out just some of the random some of the random bets. Now we have a straight. I don't think they have king queen, so we're definitely happy. Oh man, we get the pot donk. We're definitely happy playing for all the money here, so I don't think there's any other sizing option other than all in, and just hope they have a hand like 2 pair that they pay off with. Oh god, they're gonna disconnect. That's... Oh. Saved. That was very close. Ace queen off. Gonna start out by Razy Daisy from the cutoff. Big blind calls. Okay. So gonna start out by betting a quarter and calling a check raise, apparently. Did not expect to get raised. I expect to bet a quarter, villain to call, and then just bluff catch rivers, but they went ahead and put in another bet on the flop and checked it down. So it worked out, just not according to plan. Ace queen off on the button. Always good for some big blinds. 3-bet from the small blind. I think this is a hand that we could 4-bet. We could flat. I think I'm going to go for the flatting option here. King 8-4. So blocking ace king, blocking aces, blocking king queen, facing a third-ish. We're just gonna call. 8 pairing is better for us than villain, considering, you know, we have the 7-8 suiteds, 8-9 suiteds. We bet those on the turn. King pairing, probably better for villain. It counterfeits our small pocket pairs. Biggest question is, like, how thinly are they value betting here, right? Like, they need to value bet like queens, jacks, tens, aces. I have a suspicion that they recognize I'm going to check back a lot of my king X. If, you know, there's one thing from this P&E that we've seen, I'm checking back a lot of my king X on the flop. So I'm a little bit suspicious here that villain would then value bet, and suspect villain may have hand like queen jack, queen 10, jack 10. Don't think they bet ace high. I don't think there's a reason to. Sixes works too. So sixes gets counterfeit. Let's go.
This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson. Coach Brad approved.